Now the next capital budgeting technique we're going to talk about here now, this is called the internal rate of return technique. And the internal rate of return is also a very common capital budgeting technique. It's defined as the interest rate that sets the present value of the inflows equal to the present value of the outflows. And in previous videos now we've talked about internal rate of return and how you calculate it for bonds and different things. But in this case now we're looking at proposed projects. Do you want to make the investment or not? And again, the internal rate of return is the interest rate that sets the present value of the inflows equal to the present value of the outflows. What you compare the internal rate of return to now is the weighted average cost of capital, a topic that we covered in a previous set of videos. Now, if the rate of return, if the internal rate of return is greater than the firm's cost of capital, its weighted average cost of capital, that means you would accept the project. And by the way, if a project has a rate of return greater than the cost of capital, it also has a positive net present value. If the internal rate of return is less than the weighted average cost of capital, you'd reject that project. And by the way, if the rate of return is less than the cost of capital, the firm will also, or the project will have a negative net present value. Another reason to reject the project. Two of the key assumptions that we make with internal rate of return, very similar to the assumptions with net present value. One is that we reinvest all cash flows. And two, that we reinvest all the cash flows somewhere to earn the internal rate of return. Now, that's not as conservative an assumption as under net present value. The internal rate of return tends to be a higher rate of return than the cost of capital, which means that you would have to earn those higher rate of returns. It's just less likely that you're able to do that. But this is called the internal rate of return technique, and again, what you compare it to is the firm's cost of capital. If it's positive, if its rate of return is greater than the cost of capital, you accept the project because that project would indeed have a positive net present value. If the rate of return is less than the cost of capital, you'd reject the project because, again, the project would have a negative net present value. In the next video now, we're going to talk about another capital budgeting technique. It's called the Profitability Index.